Okay. Hello, everybody. Excuse my voice is a bit. I am a bit under the weather today. I have a sore throat, kind of that I just got earlier today, unfortunately. But I'm gonna try to soldier through this. To see I don't know, just to see if maybe I kind of get a better attitude as it goes along, and I'm not. Maybe I'll be a little bit more articulate than I am. Than I think I am. But anyway, this is Life of Pi by Yann Martel. I believe it's pronounced. I've heard it Yann Martel with a long A. So I'm not sure, but it is a Canadian author, and it's pretty well known novel. Lots of people know about Life of Pi. It's like kind of up 12 mil, I think over 12 million copies, I think. So but yeah, so Yann Martel was born in the 60s, I want to say early 60s. And I didn't know a lot about more beyond the movie. I had seen clips of the movie. I always saw the trailer and certain scenes of the movie, and I was always kind of, uh, I wouldn't say blown away, but definitely impressed by um, the amount of work and the way they used the special effects also in combination with all these other elements that made for a great feature length film. And I actually did finally recently watch the movie, and I did quite enjoy it more than I thought I would. I thought I would get a little bit carried, but not to uh, stray too far from the novel. But yeah, so I am kind of also lamenting the fact that I only got into this book after hearing about it so long ago recently. But yeah, I did think it was quite a ride of an adventure. He writes about a young boy named Pi Martel or um, Pi Patel. I'm sorry, who is a from Pondicherry, India, which is a pretty big kind of. I think it's one of the more of the populous cities in India, and it's kind of one of the more vibrant kind of too. Um, Kind of like with with Bombay, and he is born to a family, and he has right off the bat we get like this idea. His introduction is that he has a strong uh, kind of he has kind of a bone to pick with his name because his name is Pising. It's P-I-S. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I was right. Piscene. So it's like Piscine, but that's actually not an Indian name. So where the confusion lays, the humor too, um, depending on how if you find it funny or not, is that um, Piscine is a French name, and it's the name of a swimming pool because his uncle was like an avid swimmer, and um, the first thing in the book you kind of get is this you get kind of a meta introduction of the author trying to kind of scratching his head and like wondering how he's gonna um, pen his next novel, and then he finds himself um, you know um, he has a classic case of writer's block, and then he's finally like, oh, he meets this an Indian man that tells him that, oh, if you meet Pi Martel, if you go to meet with Pi Patel, this man in India, or he lives in Canada now, but so the author, there's semi autobiographical kind of link there, that he's trying to um, thread some novel together, and he's like trying to piece this together, and then he realizes that, or he's told by this I believe the uncle of Pi that this story will make you believe in God again. So it's like a pretty serious uh, kind of offer. So and yeah, so Pi uh, is he's um, born to a family that owns a zoo, and that's the big kind of overarching kind of thing is like the animals in these that they have in these zoos are the this man versus nature, and that the tigers and the there's a big reoccurring theme with the father scolding his Pi for getting a little bit too cozy with one of the tigers. He's like he's trying to kind of befriend it, and he sees that, oh, I see a human in this tiger, and then his father comes and he's like scolds him pretty harshly, and he's like and then he ends up sending a kind of a almost like a sacrificial lamb to to show him how beastly and untamed this thing it really is. And I thought that was a pretty interesting part because religion kind of plays it's not overly preachy. I've heard some people criticize this novel for having an air of kind of a pretentious kind of holier than thou, like, oh, I got all the answers, kind of a smugness. I think I've heard other people say. Not everybody. I just heard maybe like one or two people say that. But I think I don't know. Maybe because I can kind of identify with certain airs of a kind of a pretentious kind of loquaciousness in some respect. I didn't think that was too much of an issue for me. I thought that the character of the way it's told through his point of view, once you get into the chunk of the narrative, is that he's trying to really just kind of what's the word, navigate through his way in his faith, because he's 15 when the climactic accident of the boating accident happens. And there's obviously going to be spoilers in this one, but but I don't think my spoilers, I don't know how much that would take away from the overall themes of the novel, but I will try to not give too much away though. But he is searching for. He's a young man, a very young, or a bit, I should say, a boy at this point. He's pretty much between the ages of, I think, like 12 to 15. He's like searching for the right kind of religion. Like he kind of. I thought this was both kind of funny, in a kind of a heartwarming, and then also like a little bit also relatable, of how he's like he's cycling through all these like different religious faiths. Like one of them, he's going into the Hindu faith, which is the one of his home nation, his home city of India, and this he finds out to be the most natural to him, and he finds that this idea of that there being polytheism. And I'm not the best one to ask about the Hindu faith, but I mean, I might have watched some documentaries over the years, but I haven't retained much. But I do know that there's all these different there's creation myths that drastically contrast with the one of the Christian one, but the Christian one is more like God kind of creates man in his image, and then sets him out into the world and to kind of subdue the garden. Whereas in this case, it's like there's like a man, there's like the gods are kind of more chaotic. I guess there's more of a chaotic element to the Hindu faith that I actually kind of admire about that too, and I think other people do too. Is that there's there's certain things where it's like you see a little bit of that in the African kind of faith too, like the cosmologies, I think they're called, is like the origin stories of how humanity became, how it got to be, and there's like a element of trickery and like subterfuge to that. There's there are in fact, I think that's kind of where these like reptilian kind of things came from, is this idea of like I'm just kind of going out on a limb here, but there's some, I think, old folk tales of that shamans have told, that have dated back to very early kind of indigenous tribes of South Africa, I believe. And I think the Zulu tribe, I think, has this idea that there's they saw these flying things from the skies, and this is where ufology comes to. But I'm not going to go too much. But there's this idea of things not being what they seem, and I think there's this element of the world of appearances too. I think this is where the character of Pi, he's trying to navigate that faith, and he's and then his parents tell him it's you can't, you're one day you're a Buddhist, or I should say rather Hindu, and the next day now you're a Christian, and then after that you're going to be Islam, a Muslim, because he meets a Muslim that's baking bread, and then he also meets a Christian in a chapel in India while he's still there. Excuse me. And he tells me, you can't just keep this. You can't play. It's not like a game. They think that their kid is kind of joking around with it, he's not taking it seriously. But over and over again, Pi, he's repeats to them that they're how can God be this? God is everything. God is within, is emblematic and reflective in nature. I think he says, like, God, not just nature, but everything. He sees in, when people kind of see, he's taking kind of a more kind of Gandhi kind of open-minded approach. He's taking a more, but his father's more of kind of I think is a little bit more skeptical of religion. He says that he becomes more or less an agnostic or atheist after he sees his friends, and a lot of his friends die from I think a cholera, like a flu outbreak. I think some or it might have been an actual historical kind of cholera outbreak around earlier in the century. Because this does, I forgot to take place. The context takes place in the 70s, so a lot of this, of so a lot of his is probably in the 60s, I believe. So just to give some kind of information, but yeah, so he's Pai Patel is trying to. His brother ends up kind of being more of an athlete, taking after his uncle, and then he kind of becomes more of a religious kind of interested in all these different, practicing all these different religions at once. Taking a little bit, like he has a prayer mat from that his mother allows him to get, I think, and then he has, he makes a point of like fasting and doing all these things in the Hindu kind of tradition and the Christian and Muslim traditions too. So I think that was like an interesting, but like a little bit kind of overwhelming at times, just to kind of keep track of like what especially for kids so young too. So the zoo, the gist of what happens is that their zoo in Pondicherry is at risk to, with this new kind of government that's coming in, is going to cut down more harsher on zoos. And one more thing, I thought that what the author said was like there's an interesting thing about how people see animals being kept up in zoos, and that he's kind of gives a little bit of a anthropological, almost kind of a zoological kind of take on this, where Pai is the narrating the story, and he's talking about how weirdly enough, it's people often have this misguided, in his view, misguided notion that animals kept in captivity is like a negative, like inherently a bad thing. Like, but he says that because they have everything regulated and modulated in the way that they need it, that they have food and water, and that in the wild, like they would just like kind of I can't remember how he phrased it, but he said something to the effect. It was a pretty interesting take. I think that this people often have this idea that because you're kept away, that these animals are gonna like they would, like the best place for them to be is to be free, and then but often that kind of entails like a lot of destruction and chaos too. Like there's this aspect of letting loose and just letting these animals run free, but that would actually be kind of bad because the way that things pan out in nature, like people, nature is not necessarily often the best thing when it's just completely just like like let these let these monkeys free, or like it's like yeah, like maybe, but in a way that there's also, but they also in a loving, caring zoo like they happen to be, but that might not be the case for like but this is kind of, it just so happens that yeah. But yeah, so Pi goes on, and they realize that under this new government, they're gonna start like really trying to implement new rules that would strain their business of a zoo. So their father, it's because it's that bad. His father ends up kind of saying like we're gonna move to Canada, and that's where we're going to settle in for a new, with a lot less regulation. We'll be able to open up again. We'll just buy this. We'll just get rent a boat, this big boat, and we'll, sail across the ocean. And so Pai and his brother, his, mother and father, they all, end up getting. And it's probably, not until like a good maybe 100 pages in, I think, that really that the I don't know what you call it, like the inflaming kind of moment of like the or call to adventure, I guess you would say, happens. And there's they hear on the when they're on the boat, there's only made out to be a few people, a handful of people on this boat. um, well, actually, in hindsight, I think there was probably a cluster of more other people. Excuse me, I don't know what would be that. That'd be that. um, Dehydrated. Wow. But yeah, so they end up getting sailing across the ocean, and then suddenly there's like a big like a boom. They hear this like noise that kind of sounds like thunder might have struck, or some kind of gunfire maybe. And then they all, this family, his brother and him, get up, and then they see that. At first they don't really suspect much, but then after keeping themselves busy, kind of tending to the animals and all that, they're too tired to kind of care. And then eventually they realize that the storm is the lightning out there is so severe that there's like a rainstorm kind of brewing up. And what happens is that throughout this little period of time, there's like the ship starts like sinking down, and something with the engine gets pretty goes haywire, and then the whole thing kind of starts falling apart. So what happens then is that they get onto a lifeboat, his mother and then his but he loses touch with them, and then he kind of gets onto this other thing, and with this other group of foreign passengers. I think the Japanese people on his boat, there's like one of them is Buddhist, which they'll show up later on, but they push him onto the boat, and then he's left on there with a tiger, Richard Parker, the tiger. And the reason why the tiger is called Richard Parker is because there was a mix up at their zoo, and then one of the tigers, they decided to they ended up having a name tag on it that said Richard Parker, which was actually the name tag of one of the handlers that were selling it to him. So that mix up kind of stuck, and it became kind of a inside joke kind of refrain that flows throughout the story. But yeah, so Richard Parker's just stuck on this boat with also with a orangutan named Lucy. Orangutan was called what was it called? So lemonade or orange something. I can't remember the name of that. And orange juice. Yeah, it was just and then a hyena. So you have like the kind of the worst kind of possible conglomeration of events spiraling together at the same time. So what happens is he's stuck on this lifeboat, which is like a very thin raft, pretty much. It's not very much more than enough, but he has only those. He's left that they kind of cut him loose, and then these people kind of leave him for dead. Knowing that the people, the workers on board, obviously not his family. His family loved him too much for that, but yeah, they end up kind of leave him, throw him to the wolves, pretty much. And so yeah, Pi is stuck on this lifeboat that, like I said, is 35 foot. He gets the dimensions. He's like 35 by like 8 foot wide or something, 35 foot long or something. And then he has only, after you discovered after a little while, a small little thing of supply materials of in this chest. It's basically kind of a standard kind of package kind of thing that people life kind of package filled with rations, food rations, enough water, but then all that doesn't last. So all in all, he spends a lot of time getting through trying to tame Richard Parker, which he tries to do like a circus act at some point, trying to kind of win over his trust, and to kind of at the same time kind of mark his territory too, in a way to kind of show who's boss, pretty much, because that's kind of what he heard growing up in a zoo. So these things are kind of the context of that. Actually, his background actually is conducive to his to his surviving on the ship. So he's out in the middle of nowhere. It rains a lot. It's a downpour. He's trying to find land. He only has, he's able to, he's kind of just coasting through this ocean, rafting intermittently, and then he's um, stuck. And then what happens first is that the uh, orangutan ends up getting killed by the hyena, I believe. The hyena is just kind of like a, like a, obviously like the way he describes it as kind of a funny kind of looking creature that doesn't look like it would do much harm, but it's pretty, it's pretty ferocious, I think. But yeah, the hyena kind of out of fear and kind of just ends up uh, killing the poor orangutan, and then after that the lion, it kind of gets in a scuffle with the lion, and then lion ends up winning and then eating, or not eating, but like just killing the hyena, and then in shock, Pi sees all this kind of happen, and he's horrified too, because in the process he loses his family, like they don't survive. um, they must have, I think, drowned in the ocean. But yeah, so excuse me. But yeah, so they end up, him and Richard Parker are just kind of solo. He's alone, but he kind of has a, he sees that there's something behind Richard Parker's eyes, like there's still, like he still kind of has that affection for him, and he uses that, he feels like a bond, a strength, like he feels like this bond between him and boy and animal kind of, you know it kind of strengthens over this voyage, and because there's nothing much else to do, like he's like kind of down to his last few little rations, and then he ends up catching fish. He catches the turtle because he reads on the survivor thing that the turtle on there is like the, if you had drink the blood of it, that would be safe kind of nutrients. So yeah, what am I missing here? Yeah, throughout as the time unfolds, the rest of the brunt of the novel takes place on, in mid transit on this lifeboat, as Pi Patel is trying to negotiate his way around at the Atlantic, I believe, or the Pacific oceans, trying to and him. There's at some point where it gets in kind of a surrealist kind of, not really surrealist, but just kind of dreamlike scenario where he's so exhausted and fatigued from his from weeks without food, without proper nourishment at this point, and Pi is desperately trying to keep himself conscious. He really does go reach almost the brink of like annihilation at some point, but he ends up kind of dreaming, or it's not sure if it's like if 100% of this is a real kind of lived experience, but they go to this island that seems to be off the map kind of location where they find all sorts of it's inhabited only by meerkats, and the meerkats kind of thrive, and Richard Parker's like running around kind of at some points he's eating the meerkats and it's like it's got it's like ripe with fruit and stuff like that, and he's like that's kind of the one of the parts that he gives into a kind of a more like what is going on here, like what is this real or is this, but the way he the way he describes it, it's like enough to engage your attention, but that's the only part where I thought that it kind of lost me, just as on because it's not like a I'm not really sure if I'm seeing any part of this that, but yeah, so so they're going throughout the and I'm gonna try to tie this up. Forgive me if I'm just leaving out a whole chunk of the novel, but yeah. So towards the end of it, he ends up kind of swimming ashore back onto the the shore of Mexico, and Mexican people kind of they take him into their hospital, and he recuperates, and then he recovers over a slow amount of time, and he's just relaxing and all that, and these two Japanese, I think there's two or maybe they were Chinese, I think these two guys that work with a insurance company, I think, or talking about the boat, want to get down to the detail of what happened on the this boat, and he tells them like these three different stories of like what happened, because they keep telling him it's like there's no way like it's just come on, just cut to the chase, like there's no way you could have just like survived on this lifeboat with only a Bengalese 300 or 500 pound tiger, like there's and hyena and a orangutan, like that would just be like not possible. So he tells him like the three different kind of um stories, comprised of like kind of of like thematic details of like him talking about how the chef, the French chef who's played by I can't remember um, um, the who played him in the film, but he did a great job. But yeah, um, he basically kind of turned out to be a psychopath, and um, he killed his mother, or he the innocent kind of uh, likable Buddha that was on the ship, the Japanese Buddha, I think, that was said to have been on the ship. He kind of makes up a story of him, and then getting um, killed by the chef, and then eaten, or proposed to be eaten, I think, by the chef, because he turned out to be an awful person, and then um, you know and then his mother ends up kind of standing up to him, and for and standing up for pie, and then yeah, that doesn't end well, because the chef ends up killing him, and killing her too. So that basically ends up kind of being a symbolic of like what happened with um, the uh, the tiger was ended up being, I think the chef was the hyena, I think, but or something like that. I get the details are lost to me, but basically that all that translated over into the real life what happened. So he's like, choose whichever story you want, because at the end of the day, it's my word against yours, pretty much. So, but yeah, that's my kind of very fumbled, sickly, inarticulate, massively rambling take on this book. I did like it. I did like it. I think I would want to reread it, because it's not too long. It's not wasn't that challenging. I thought like I only had some problems with the tone here and there. The tone seemed a bit like where are we going with this? Because it seemed like at some point it would be like engaging with a literary device of like, let's say, metafiction, where it's like a nested story happening, where it's like, oh, we're an hour in a jungle, and in this thing, and then, but at the same time, in other parts, it seemed like it would just give a kind of traditional kind of storytelling, very just kind of with no um with no not nothing really too much um too like difficult to kind of parse out. So that was the only issue I might have taken with it. Aside from that, it was a wonderful book, I thought, and I definitely recommend it. I mean, obviously, it's been it's kind of had its surge of influence already, so it's kind of hard to kind of like um, my word. But anyway, yeah, that's all I have for today, and thanks for bearing with me. And yeah, I'll see you.